What's up, everybody? It's Christian from Undefined Engineering. Today I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about what it was like to work in my previous role at Tesla as a quality engineer. As a lot of y'all know, I'm currently a quality engineer at Shield AI, where I work on autonomous aircraft, specifically on low voltage avionics systems. I know a lot of people may be curious as to what it was like to work at a company like Tesla, especially as they were launching the Cybertruck and launching a factory like Giga Texas. So my specific role at Tesla, I was a quality engineer over functional low voltage electronics. So that means as a quality engineer, I owned the quality of low voltage electronics from product design to customer. Essentially, I would own the quality side of design for manufacturing and assembly as we were prototyping designs and then moving them into manufacturing, where I would make sure that those designs were able to be manufactured reliably and repeatably. And that involved things like building out processes on the line, establishing controls for the design as we were building them out, and establishing like measurement systems and things like that moving forward. And then from there, once the designs left our factory and they were with our customers, I would own field-related issues for those quality or for those products. Prior to Tesla, I was a low voltage quality engineer for Toyota. That's where I got my start in low voltage electronics. There are a lot of big differences between a factory like Toyota, where they have a lot of standards and traditions in place, versus Tesla, where it's a lot more fast-paced, a lot more innovative, and everything essentially is centered around beating competitors to market. When people hear that I worked at Tesla, one of the first questions they ask is, what was starting there like? My honest answer, keep in mind, I was a relatively new engineer. I had around maybe close to 2 years of experience before I went to Tesla. So keeping that in mind, I would have to akin it to getting hit in the face with a shovel. Not that bad. It's not like anywhere else you've worked if you haven't worked at an Elon company. Elon companies are very, very different than your standard mass manufacturing company, especially in the automotive world. There's a lot of tradition and a lot of standards and a lot of processes already set in place at companies like Toyota, Honda, maybe some of those German companies like BMW, Porsche. But Tesla, they're a groundbreaking company, the first ones to really shoot to make it in the EV space. So that required them to scale up quick, scale up at a massive rate, and essentially hit the market before everyone else does. And that requires them to move extremely fast all through their supply chain and engineering team. I would akin it to working at a very, very large scale startup, where teams are very small, very lean, but very efficient. So typically you'd have larger teams working on one single portion of a product base. But at Tesla, you have individuals owning a product line. And that means owning from conception to customer. So that requires a lot more fast-paced decision-making, a lot more fast-paced design updates, everything along those lines. As far as actually starting at Tesla, typically when you go to when you go anywhere, there's a long training period before you get started in your role. But at Tesla, you are expected to come in, hit the ground running, and really own what you're doing. So essentially, what it was like for me to get started there was I had orientation day 1 and day 2. Day 3, I met my manager. And then for the next 2 weeks, I had minimal contact with them while I directly jumped into issues on the line related to quality. And I was expected to own and deliver on those issues immediately. So execution was a big thing. No matter how new you are at Tesla, you need to execute. And that's the main thing I would say I learned from my first few weeks there. Now, the second biggest question I probably hear most frequently when people hear I worked at Tesla is, what were the biggest challenges I faced while I was there? And we can kind of stem off what my first few weeks and getting started there was like, because I think this is where I've met the greatest adversity. So starting there, you really don't get a roadmap as to what you need to do to be successful. You are owner of your product commodity. So for me, I was owner of low voltage electrical systems and firmware for the Model Y. At that point, Cybertruck hadn't started running yet, so I hadn't immediately went to Cybertruck at this point. We still had about 8 months before Cybertruck made its way into the factory. So at this point, I was over Model Y. We were producing thousands of cars per week. And anytime an issue sprang up, it was me that had to respond to that and own that issue. And when you're producing thousands of cars a week, there are multiple issues that could pop up at the same time. So yeah, with that being said, I think jumping in and juggling multiple high priority items at one time was the hardest thing for me to get used to at first. Especially at the beginning, it was hard to not take those things home with you. Each issue had to be resolved as fast as possible because we were pushing thousands of cars off the line at a time. And every time a car rolls off the line, that's the business making money. If a car rolls off the line and it's not able to start, it's not able to essentially go straight to a customer, every second lost there is an impact to the company, and every second lost there is on you. So you have to own essentially driving that product to completion. And I think that's what really was hard for me to get used to at first. And I know it's similar at other companies, but at other companies you have a whole team of, let's say, low voltage electronics engineers working with you. At Toyota, when I was on their low voltage electronics team, we had low voltage electronics quality engineers for switches, we had them for wire harnesses, we had them for controllers, we had them for infotainment. There are different types, but at Tesla, you're the sole person over that entire system architecture. So anything happening there, you need to fully resolve. And that was pretty tough for me to get used to at first, especially as a newer engineer earlier in my career. Another big challenge I faced coming into Tesla was, I know you hear this maybe on the internet or in some news articles, how Elon really pushes that direct communication structure where you shouldn't have to escalate through your supervisor and then they go through their supervisor and then they go to a VP or director level position. At Tesla, Elon really pushes the mindset and culture of resolve issues fast, do not care about structure and hierarchy. So something that was hard for me to get used to was presenting and giving updates to such high level management positions when I was a new engineer at the time. Like I said, you're extreme owner of your commodity. So if there's an issue that's blocking the line, or if there's an issue that's directly involving customers, you're the one that's going to be presenting to the Tom Zoos. You're the one that's going to be presenting to the Elons. You're the one that's going to be presenting to the legal teams. Another big challenge I faced at Tesla that I didn't necessarily have to deal with at Toyota was the conflicting priorities and how you had to fight for your say in something in order to get something done. So Tesla is it's a company that has very smart individuals, very capable engineers, very efficient engineers. And above all, everyone is confident. They are willing to go for what they think is right. And sometimes that means one team is pushing for something and another team is pushing for something. And you essentially have to work together to find out what's the fastest way to have a resolution that fits the company objective. And sometimes, as a quality engineer, quality related issues would naturally slow down production. And as a high functioning business, you want to do anything you can to not slow down your product moving out of the door. So as a quality engineer, I had to find creative and fast solutions to solve problems in a way that didn't slow down the company as much as possible. And typically, like at a Toyota or a Honda, they'll pull that and they'll stop the line, and a huge team of engineers would meet to essentially root cause and solve the issue. But at Tesla, we really pushed the boundaries. As soon as we identified an issue, we had to have that issue resolved by the end of shift, essentially. If it was a huge issue, if we knew it was going to take longer than 5 minutes, we had to have that thing resolved quickly. We had to have a suspect population drafted. We had to have a containment in place. But we had to have that solution driven by the end of the shift, if possible. And we always strive to do the impossible. So everything is possible. All right. So I touched on this a little bit prior, but the type of people that work at Tesla? That's another question I get frequently. What kind of person is successful here? What kind of person is Tesla looking to hire? Essentially, the type of people that I worked with, they're all brilliant engineers. I would say world-class, the best individually achieving engineers I probably ever worked with in my career. That being said, they also knew how to have fun. It was a very lighthearted environment. Everyone knew that everyone was underwater and essentially fighting at ludicrous pace to be successful. So that instilled like a lot of camaraderie. There were definitely people who were cocky. There were cocky individuals, but it came from a place of I achieved something great versus I think I'm the man. But it was a very tight-knit group. It was like, I get hesitant to say family, but when you go through fire with people like you do at Tesla, when you're working 12 plus hour shifts where sometimes you have to bring a sleeping bag to work because you need to deliver results by tomorrow, you form bonds with those people. That being said, the 12 plus hour days are tough. It's not for everybody. And a lot of people ask, why don't you leave? Having to work those types of hours. Long story short, it's pride in your work. Everybody at Tesla is proud to be there. They want to be there. They feel like they are changing the world in an engineering aspect and a human aspect. As we were getting to launch the Cybertruck line, even internally, we would see the media talk about the Cybertruck and have their expectations set so high, and internally to the plant, our expectations were even higher. I know at the time we were getting criticized for how slow, since Elon initially showed the world the prototype to how quickly we were able to institute it into the manufacturing lines. People were criticizing us for that. But keep in mind, this factory is a half a mile long facility with multiple floors dedicated to Cybertruck. This is a wonder of the world type of engineering effort to ensure that this line gets set up, validated by a very small team of lean, high-performing engineers. You'd expect hundreds of engineers to be on that line, working that product, validating the line at the same time, and essentially greenlighting it for production. But it's a very small team of engineers working on that. There's a couple quality engineers, there's a couple manufacturing engineers, there's the design engineering team there to lead the efforts as well. Then you have your manufacturing production supervisors, but it's a lot smaller than you'd think. So it's a monumental effort that took the best minds in engineering to achieve, and it was an absolutely historic feat, and I'm really proud to be a part of that. So what's the typical day for a quality engineer there? Long story short, you get there thinking you're going to do one thing and you end the day doing something completely different. I'll go from the sustainment aspect and then I'll go to the Cybertruck aspect. So as a Model Y quality engineer, the Model Y was already a developed product. We had it working in Fremont, we have it working in Shanghai. We were just transitioning it to Gigafactory Texas. So that was a much smoother process. Essentially, it was a lot of monitoring key KPIs like customer-facing issues, manufacturing line yield issues, and then product development issues. We were already past the product development stage at this point. I mean, we were in iteration phases for our product, but it was a traditional standard like NPI sort of process, so it wasn't anything crazy. In terms of facing customer issues, like I would get into work in the morning, check my emails, analyze data, ensure that the line was running smoothly. And then I would analyze our top hitting customer facing issues. I would identify those issues, take it into my triage and see if there's any way I could root cause and drive a solution at our product design level or at our manufacturing level. So that would be my P1. I would want to solve any customer facing issue that came my way. And fun fact, a big customer facing issue that I actually got to put in a countermeasure mitigation for was the very famous steering wheel falling off in the road issue. That was not a good time. But I was able to identify a process control and a product control that would essentially do a 200% verification of essentially controlling that issue. I feel good about being a direct part of why that hasn't happened again. So a lot of it is things like identifying a product issue, going to the point of occurrence, establishing why things are happening, essentially setting a containment up, identifying a suspect population, ensure we have gate checks in place to ensure we have conforming product hitting our line once we identify an issue, and then essentially driving the root cause from there. This would be happening dozens of times a day, all at the same time. So it really required a good understanding of your product and what kind of priority level you should assign things as they were popping up with you. So that being said, like obviously highest priority items are things that would bring the line down. Could we not output a car because this issue is happening? So those would be P1. Essentially we would tackle those issues as fast as possible. And then P2s would be things like functional issues that aren't necessarily as critical. We can contain the car at the end of the line, we can push it through, and then essentially drive a mitigation after we get to those P1 issues. And then P3s are things that are like maybe not functional impacting, they're less severe. They're less severe, less occurring issues. If we know we have some sort of control in place to keep those items from flowing out of production, those would be put on our back burner. That would essentially be a lot of our day. End of the day, what typically constituted the end of the day is ensuring that you're setting up the line for success moving into night shift. So you didn't have a typical end of the day. It's not like you show up at 8 a.m., 7 a.m., and then leave at 5 every day. You don't leave until you set your team up for success moving forward. So that is the reason why there are a lot of 12-hour days, 13-hour days. When you're working with a live manufacturing line, you can't just leave when you're the extreme owner of the product. That's the typical day with Model Y. Cybertruck, completely different. So Cybertruck, we were still in the product development phase. We were greenlighting all these things that were going into the truck. So this involved a lot of dedicated work with our design engineering team to ensure that their designs, typically built on a local level, could integrate perfectly into a homogeneous system. It's easy for a design engineer to overlook how their components interact with the system, an overall system. So this is really where the Elon methodology of like first principles engineering comes into play, and questioning constraints in order to be successful. So there's like instances where, let's say you're designing a controller and the controller passes your bench testing, but there's instances where you could put it into the truck or put it into a car and all of a sudden you're not getting the readings that you thought you were. It'd be on me to work with our prototyping team to figure out exactly like what system integration issues are we having here. Like this controller is working at the local level, but when we integrate it to our system, we're seeing failures. And are the failures we're seeing actually true failures? When we define the spec, had we validated each individual component of our system? Did we know how our system was going to interact as a whole before we defined this? So yeah, it's hard. So let's say you're interested in a role at Tesla. You want to be an engineer at Tesla. What exactly is Tesla looking for in one of their engineers? I happened to interview a bunch of potential incoming engineers during my time at Tesla, and I can tell you something that I saw in engineers that were successful. And I can tell you things that I saw in engineers that didn't quite pan out with the company. So successful engineer, let's start there. So Tesla looks for, I don't want to say they look for specific individuals. I would say the type of person that gets hired at Tesla is very specific in terms of work ethic, desire, and execution. Tesla really looks for engineers who don't take no for an answer, who don't let preconceived conception or preconceived ideas and philosophies about things limit them in what they can accomplish. It takes a very dynamic, independent, and strong-willed person to be successful at Tesla. You essentially have to do the most you can with the least amount possible. Me specifically, what I looked for when I was interviewing, I would see, yeah, maybe they had great experience prior. Maybe they were a technical novel. But in order to be successful at Tesla, you need to know how to navigate yourself in environments where you have absolutely no idea what's going on. Like, how well can you adapt and overcome to a situation that you've seen for the first time in your life? Because working at Tesla, you're going to get a lot of firsts. It's not like a traditional company. You don't go by the standard processes that are outlined based on years of tradition. Because you're doing that, you're going to be put in uncomfortable positions where you have no one that you could rely on for backing on previous experience. So you are really setting your own precedent when you start with Tesla. And I tried to find individuals that I felt like would be successful in that type of environment. I would say the worst thing you could see in a person or a candidate at Tesla or interviewing at Tesla is if a major roadblock that they faced is, I'm waiting on an answer from this person. I'm waiting to hear back from this team. I'm blocked because I'm not getting a response here. That just will not cut it there. You need to be proactive. You need to be an extreme owner. If the person you're relying on to get this information isn't outputting for you, it's on you to get that. So I try to find people that really bias towards action. Candidates that weren't as successful with the company are surprisingly candidates that had many, many years of prior experience, typically at other legacy automotive companies. That shock factor that engineers would get when they come into Tesla, a lot of people couldn't shake that. You'd expect to come in and see an environment where everything is super standardized, everything is set in place, but they get in having relied on that in the past and find that they're the ones that now have to set that precedent and build those systems and figure out what works and what doesn't. And a lot of people can't handle that. And I'd say that's where I saw a lot of failure with candidates that would come in and quickly leave. To be more specific on things that will make you successful at Tesla, I think it'd be good to cover some key topics. So the first one is extreme ownership. We've touched on this a lot, but being an extreme owner of what you're doing, having customer and business first decision making, not letting your team or your typical roles priorities conflict with what the business or customer needs is a huge thing for Tesla. So that extreme ownership, driving things from conception to resolution, that's really going to be a big part of what makes you successful there. Questioning your constraints. And when I say question your constraints, I mean, if you are blocked by a process or if you are blocked by a technical specification, question, why is this constraint there? If it has a legacy of being there for traditional companies or traditional products, why is it there? How can you work your way around that? Question your constraints, essentially make your requirements less dumb. If you can make your requirements less dumb, you can build an efficient product in an extremely fast amount of time or extremely short amount of time. Another one, along the lines of questioning your constraints, design out the part of variable that you're working with. If you're coming across an issue, what ways can you adapt your system in order to be self-sustaining without the thing that's causing the issue for you? A saying that I've heard online with Elon is, if you aren't adding 10% of the things you're taking out back, then you aren't taking out enough. A good example is the SpaceX Raptor engine. Raptor 1 versus Raptor 3, completely different engines. Just looking at it, you don't even have to know a lot about engines, but you can tell it is a technical masterpiece in design elimination. And I want to touch on these last four really quickly. They're not quite as important as I'd say the first few were. We touched on them a lot in this video already, but communicate directly regardless of hierarchy. Don't be scared to do that. Don't be scared to reach out to people regardless of title. You got to do what you got to do to ensure the business is successful. So have that confidence in yourself and bias towards action. Another big one, everyone's heard Elon say this, don't waste time in meetings. If you are an individual contributor, you should be working with a dedicated group of people to resolve anything that in real time, any issue that would potentially take a meeting to discover or to triage. Constantly innovate and strive to do the impossible. You're going to be put in situations that challenge your mindset, that really test your resolve, and essentially reprioritize what you thought were priorities as an engineer. To be able to do the impossible and constantly innovate and adapt to that environment, you're going to be set up to be successful at this company.
All right, ready to go into fun facts?
All right. So now that we're through the nitty-gritty, I thought it'd be good to get some fun facts out there, frequently asked questions. Hannah from behind the camera will be helping in this effort. So yeah, let's get started. Hannah, what are some fun facts that you might want to know about?
Did you ever see Elon?
Did I ever see Elon? Yes, actually, quite a few times. We'd see him, we'd see his kid. He'd always have a security detail with him. He was directly involved in meetings. I know as he acquired Twitter, he was less involved with what was going on, just because that was such a huge acquisition. But yeah, we saw him frequently, and there was actually, fun fact, in one of his news interviews, I can't remember, but they were in his office. It's a floating office, like a glass office that floats above the manufacturing line for Model Y. And he was doing an interview there, and I was walking along the Model Y line, and you could see me in the background.
What were Giga Tex's events like the Cybertruck launch?
Oh, the Cybertruck launch was absolutely insane. I'm pretty active on keeping up with like tech news on YouTube, things like that, and I saw some of the most popular like car reviewers at the Giga Texas event, and it was like seeing little mini celebrities out there, like you, and they were so curious as to like what was happening on the line. They would come and talk to you to get the inside scoop as to what's happening as we're launching Cybertruck, and yeah, that was really cool, and it was great when those events would happen because you could really see like the impact what you were doing was having on the public. The people that would come to these events were essentially super fans, and we have a lot of pride for what we were doing there. So to see like the fans come on and cheer on the Cybertruck at the time, that was like really gratifying and a really rewarding experience for like all the hard work that the team put in.
Given that Tesla is such a groundbreaking company, anytime anything went wrong with the product, it made huge news. So did you have any direct impact on any of those major news stories?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I can't go too into what I had done, but I touched on this earlier in the video. The steering wheel falling off issue, that was huge on Twitter. Essentially, I put the countermeasure and control in place to ensure that doesn't happen again. I haven't heard about that since, so I think it's working. I think it's robust.
People have heard that Gigafactory Texas is huge. So how long would it take you to get from your car and actually into the building?
Whoo! Yeah, this is probably the worst part of the day. So, yeah, the factory's half a mile long, but you can't just park in front of it. There's a huge parking lot out back with a whole customized shuttle system to get you from the parking lot to the front of the building. And it essentially took, at the quickest, 15 minutes to park your car, get on the shuttle, and get to the front door. But if you showed up during like typical business hours, it would sometimes take 30 to 45 minutes to get from your car to the shuttle. And then leaving the factory sometimes took an hour to get to your car. So it was It was tough. Yeah.
So now you've survived getting from the parking lot and into the building. How big did that plant feel from the inside?
Yeah, so the plant, the scale is gargantuan. I mentioned it earlier. It's truly like another wonder of the world. Luckily, I didn't have to walk or jog in a lot of cases all the time. We had dedicated trikes for the engineers to hop on anytime we needed to get to an area fast. So we had typical buggies, of course, manufacturing carts that could drive to places. But if those weren't available, you're hopping on a trike and you're pedaling away to get there as fast as possible.
So you mentioned that you worked on the Cybertruck and were there for its launch. Did you ever get to take the Cybertruck out before it was released to customers?
This is a good one that I wanted to touch on. So as a quality engineer for Giga Texas and Cybertruck, a big part of like validating the product was taking the truck off site before it was released to customer. So there were really cool experiences that I had. Like I'm sure a lot of people remember this when the Cybertrucks were getting posted on Twitter before they were released to customers, and going viral for like being at the airport or being downtown in Austin, or just randomly driving around. That was actually myself and my teammates validating the Cybertruck in a field environment to see if we could produce any failures or any reliability issues based off of products that we were going to release into the truck for the customers. I remember specifically one time going downtown to a really popular barbecue joint called Terry Black's. The truck had just finished an environmental test, so it had mud all over the side of it. People hadn't seen this before, and we were driving downtown, and it was every car and every person you passed had their phone out videoing you. It made you feel like a celebrity. It was really, really cool. And getting to Terry Black's and getting out of the truck and essentially having a swarm of people surround the truck and ask, "What do you do for a living?" It was awesome to say that I was an engineer that was working on that vehicle. So I want to end this video with a retrospective. I want to go over some of the positives that I took leaving from Tesla and some things that I can now identify as red flags in other companies as I move forward in my career. That being said, I'd like to touch on some things that I think made me a better engineer because I worked at Tesla. So one big thing that I want to touch on is working in such a fast-paced environment, one that's like Tesla, it really makes everything else feel slow. So moving forward, like things I experience as fast-paced, high-impact issues really feel like the norm to me now. So that's something that I'm grateful for my experience at Tesla, because it really showed me how to adapt and overcome to those high-pressure situations and to remain calm in the face of adversity. Now that I've had experience with that extreme ownership side of things and really pushing as hard as I can to get things done, I feel like nothing that can stop me in any role that I move to in the future. Essentially, I feel like I'm set up for success in any sort of discipline I go into. It doesn't even have to be quality engineering. The amount of direct contribution I got in roles all across the playing field I feel like I've been set up to succeed anywhere I go. And I don't think that's something I could have experienced working anywhere else. All right, now that we've gone through some of the positives, I'm going to go through some of the things that may not have been the best working there. Something that people would definitely have to get used to is the work-life balance. It's a very demanding environment. It's natural when people are so involved in the success of the overall company. There's going to be days where you're there for 12 plus hours, 15 plus hours. It's normal. There's going to be days where you have to stay overnight. There's going to be days where you have to sacrifice something outside of work to be successful in something inside of work. And I get it. Some people, they value their life outside of work more than what they're doing at work. So it's just a real personal decision to work there. And that's what I mean when it's not for everyone. If I were to put everything together overall about my time at Tesla and what I think it means for an engineering career, I think if you're able to put your head down, really drive and execute and just hold strong in your resolutions, it sets you up for success, and any door in front of you will be swung open because you were able to be successful in that environment. I think it was a fundamental building block in how I tackle things in my career now and how I tackle things in the world. I feel like I can't be fazed by anything. And I know that's a tall statement, but I think working at Tesla molds you into a person that won't take no for an answer and that will demand to be successful. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate everyone that stuck around to the end of the video. This was a tough one. I've been trying to put into words what it was like to work at Tesla, and it's hard. It's hard. It's an experience, and sometimes it feels like an out of body experience. But at the end of the day, it was a great time, and I enjoyed every second of it, and I appreciate all of y'all that were on here to learn about it. So, peace. Thanks.